Hello, my name is Carolyn Duncan and I'm a spinner, weaver and dyer. I live in Tasmania, which is a state right at the bottom of Australia. Next stop after us is Antarctica. Several years ago I purchased a DVD off the net and it was a great DVD. The title was Weaving with Decorative Yarns and it had lots of useful information on it, but the DVD dealt with only one kind of yarn and it was a slinky yarn. It was very nice. It had great information about set and I found that particularly useful, but it really didn't address the issues that I had, which were how to work with yarns like feathers and ostrich and bobbly yarns that I've long lost the actual proper names for. Like most knitters, I've got a stash that goes back literally decades, and I wanted to be able to use these yarns when I started weaving. As I said, although this DVD was great, it didn't provide me with the information that I needed, so I had to work it out myself. When I started a weaving group at a local community group in Triabunna, we tackled a number of difficult yarns as a group, and unfortunately several people decided that weaving was not for them. And I didn't know a lot at that stage, and in fact looking at this photo of this close-up of this scarf, which was sold a long time ago, I can see some serious flaws in this. I mean, the weave here is not right. My set was totally wrong. But I was a beginner too at that stage, and we learnt together, and those of us that persevered with it got to the stage where we could actually create items that we were really happy with. So the first point is the actual yarns that you use. As I said, the DVD was great, but it was a very smooth, very slinky commercial yarn. And I can't see that would have posed any problem at all, really. But it was, again, a good DVD. The sort of yarns that I have in my stash are like this one here. I have no idea what this is called. I call it a fluffy. I have what I call assorted fluffies. This one, however, I know is ostrich. It's a yarn which, when you spread it out, as you can see here, it's got a core yarn and then lots and lots of pieces that come off it. This one is similar, but it's a much heavier yarn. So that's one of the first things. The actual weight of the yarn can help. So if you're a beginner, stay away from fine yarns and don't go near ostrich. It ruined one lady's thoughts about weaving for life. This one down here is the good old-fashioned feathers. It was terribly in fashion at one stage a decade or so ago. The colours in it are beautiful, but personally I'm not thrilled about it as a knitting yarn, but as a weaving yarn it's fabulous, and oh my gosh does it sell, particularly this colourway. It's not really available now through the stores, but I haunt the op shops, Salvos, Vinnies and places like that, because it's amazing when people de-stash. The op shops are one of the first places that they donate their yarns to, and I can pick up some fabulous bargains there. Apart from the fact they're very, very cheap, there are also lots of things that are completely out of stock elsewhere. These yarns, again, they're fluffies, but they're heavier than, say, something like this ostrich, and they have bobble, so I call these the bobbly yarns. Again, this is a Moda variety. This one here, the greens and autumn-toned piece, is going to be much easier to weave with. You can see it's equivalent to about an 8 ply or double knit, as they call it in the States. And these ones are a similar sort of weight, and again would knit to an 8 ply, but they have these feathery bits coming off them, as well as bobbles through the actual fibre of the yarn. Recently, an op shop find was a whole lot of this Cleckheaton velvet ribbon, which I was pleased to find will dye. And it was great because it was just all a sort of a limey green colour. But ribbons are wonderful. And this yarn here, you can't really see it, but Shorn sheep, it's called. It has bobbly bits on it that you'll see in an item a bit later on that stick out. And again, ribbon type yarns are very easy to weave with. These yarns here are 3 different colourways that are fabulous. They're one of my favourites. They weave really easily. You can get excellent tension on them. Now, that's the key to all of these yarns. Can you get them under a good tension? Now, I'm talking about using them as warp yarns, not as weft. Weft really doesn't matter how strong the yarn is. For example, this one over here, this Moda Vera Oxley. Gorgeous yarn, and I love textured yarns. This is thick and thin and different colours, but absolutely hopeless. I drove myself mad trying to use this as a partial warp. More about that later. But you need to do a test on the yarn. If you can pull it and it comes apart, it's not suitable for a warp. You need to be able to give it a couple of good snaps with your hands, and it should withstand that if you want to warp it, particularly if it's a decorative yarn. These ones are just wonderful, but again, I suspect it's a sold-out version. This is the ostrich again. It's another colourway. You can see how long the pieces are that come off it. Now, I've got it here again because I wanted to compare it with something like this Heirloom Jazz. This is my all-time favourite yarn. Now, this has got huge pieces that come off it. Oh, in the most gorgeous colourways as well. Again, another discontinued yarn that I haunt wool shops, and if I find it, I buy their entire stock. It's wonderful when it's woven. And you'd think that with the length of this piece sticking out, it would be a hassle, but it's not. It's actually quite reasonable to weave because although it's fairly fine, as you can see here, it's strong and you can get a really good tension on it. Doesn't mean it's not problematic to weave, but it's a whole different ball game to this ostrich here. These are blended yarns. These came from the yarn store in Victoria, which is a state of Australia. They're made up of, as you can see, 4 or 5 smaller strands that have been blended together, and beautiful colours. This lovely blue one, dark blue one, has a fleck through it, and they weave nicely, but they're difficult to get even tension because they're made up of so many different parts. So again, with something like this, it's the tension that really is the key. On the plus side, if you don't manage to catch all of the fibres together and you have a skip of one of these fine ones, I just cut it off after I've finished the scarf. You can't tell. That's the plus. So I've even actually pulled fibres out, and it really has made no difference, the finished scarf. This one here was an op shop find, this pink one. It's a mohair. Now, one of the girls at the community centre walked up a loom, and it wasn't old style Ashford, so it didn't have some of the newer designs that give you a better tension, but she did her whole warp with mohair. Oh, and it was such a struggle. Every shed, she had not just to move the rigid heddle down, but she had to run her hands right through every strand to separate them. So mohair is what we call a sticky yarn. The ostrich, because of the fibres that come out, is also sticky. So contrast to that, next to it are these beautiful, I think they're cotton linen blends. They're braids of various sorts. They would be a dream to weave, but not mohair. So unfortunately, she decided that weaving was not for her after this, but it was a bad mistake. But again, if you're a beginner, use mohair only as a weft. Beautiful in a weft. You can get lots of it. It's freely available. Again, do your op shopping and you'll find it. Right, so here we are back to this one that is the cover photo. And you can see that through here I've got that bobbly yarn. This is there's some ostrich in through here. There's bobbles, hand spun. This is feathers. That's a boucle yarn from somewhere. And again, hand spun. Too fine for this really. You can see there's too many spaces, or perhaps I wasn't finishing it properly at that stage. This is one of the first scarves I ever made. And again, we've got more feathers and more bobbly yarns over this side. So it looks great when it's out. And I do like our old apple ladder, because Tasmania is called the Apple Isle. And this ladder has been used for decades in the Dowling family in the Huon to pick apples, initially for export to the UK. It's just got the most wonderful character in it. The paint's all worn off, and it's actually worn from various steps up and down over the literally centuries. This is another one that worked out better because when you look closely at it, I've used braids. There's no fluffies in this. This one's just a bobbly yarn with a little bit of fluffy. So this is a really good starting point. You'll notice it's finished better. We don't have those gaps in it. And there's only bands of decorative fabrics. This is all hand spun. There's no mill spun in this one at all. This one here is a yarn that I have blended, in that the black in this is alpaca, and I had an alpaca single that I applied with a decorative yarn. So this is a really good way, if you've got a fine decorative yarn, apply it with a single. But you can see this is a much better result than the first pink one. So here are some vests that I made. I'm not sure about this dangly bit here. That must have been something that came undone. Photographing your work's really good because you pick up things in the photograph that you don't see when it's actually just sitting in front of you. So this was a vest that I made. I wove a long section and then cut out a neckline and a front. But here I've used decorative yarn in a strip here and here for side treatments. The centre panel, the decorative yarn is used alternately with mill spun. And this was a 200-gram ball of mill spun pure wool, a very long colourway like a cake. So it looked particularly effective with these two decorative fabrics. Over here I've got another variation. This one is this is the heirloom, and this is why I absolutely love it. It's time consuming because all of those little bobbly bits get caught in. You have to go through and pull them out by hand. I use a tapestry needle to pull them out to the right side, and I leave a few facing the back. Both of these vests are unlined. If I'm lining it, I pull them all to the right side. And this panel here, going down either side, is a panel of feathers, and this black is also feathers. I'm not wild about the fringes that you get from feathers yarn. To me, it's a bit bobbly, but customers liked it. So both of these have now been sold quite some time ago. The thing with this is, though, if you're doing it for garments, if you're weaving for garments and you're only using your decorative yarn in strips, you need to think about where they will be. Coming back to this one, you can see a lot of the decorative yarn was actually cut away to make that neckline. But I didn't mind because I had planned for that and I made the strip wide enough. If that had been a narrow strip, like the treatment on the sleeves or on the vest here, and here you can see it's been removed as part of the construction. But I thought it was worth it because it looked really great on the end result. This is a close-up of a weaving that was done using ostrich. And the poor woman that started this, in hindsight, I should not have let her, but she just loved the colours. And I thought it would be fine because, as you can see here, this ostrich is separated quite a bit by, this was a commercial yarn that she was using in between. Whether it was the older style of the Ashford loom that made it really difficult to get a good tension, maybe it was just the tensioning overall wasn't the best. This was in the early days before I learned some of the tricks I'm about to show you, but this went right across the loom, and it was a 16-inch width rigid heddle loom. And yeah, I find I'm better off to locate my decorative threads in groups, as you saw just then with the vests, rather than try and do it right across the width of the shawl. I spin on a Magicraft Aura most of the time. It's a double treadle because I'm very arthritic and I find I need that double treadle. But I also have an electric wheel, which I use mostly for plying, or if my arthritis gets particularly bad, I go to that. I have a 4-shaft jack loom. It's threaded up here with some bamboo that I spun. I can show you this scarf finished. It was an ICAT style dye technique and fairly fine. The only reed I have for this at the moment is a 12 dent reed, so I can only put finer yarns through it. So bamboo was perfect. It's fairly uniform, it's slinky and smooth, and it suits this reed. The rigid heddle, on the other hand, I have 2 of those. I've got a 60 and a 120 centimetre rigid heddle looms. I also have the Ashford variable heddle, and that's an absolute boon for working with decorative fabrics. But what I wanted to show you with this is the way that I have this set up. So what I have here, you can see there's feathers yarn in this section here. Then there's plain yarn, feathers again, plain yarn, feathers again, and some small groupings of feathers. So the point I was making about that scarf from hell, the shawl, it's not a good idea to put something like ostrich right across. Feathers is not too bad. It's actually quite strong and you can get quite a good tension on it. But what I do to help with the tension is that when I first warp it up and I've tied my front on, after I've done all that and I'm ready to weave, I then force a stick shuttle underneath right up the back. I also use corrugated cardboard in between my layers of warp. When I first started, I just used paper or manila folders, but I find that corrugated cardboard builds up the height, and I think that that additional height is a real advantage. I also use that on my front bar as well. Once I start feeding on, in addition to this one across the back, I have a second one. So this back one gives me increased tension, and sometimes it's really difficult with a variety of fibres to get a uniform tension. Sometimes I've only placed this underneath the decorative yarns to lift them up and give them a bit of tension. So you have to be prepared to experiment. Also, what I have done here, I usually find this is the down shaft. Down shafts, you can see here's the yarn through the slots, and down here is the yarn through the eyes. Now you can see there's quite a good shaft opened up there. If you find it's not opening up, I run a second stick shuttle. Now I have this not in this shed, but I have this stick shuttle in a top shed. sometimes, particularly on my 120 centimetre loom, I find my top shed is where I have more problems. If this is through the bottom shed, you can bring it forward, flip it up, and pass your shuttle through, and it helps open up the shed. When you go to the top shed, you can push this right to the back, and it helps to open up the top shed with a bit of pressure on it. Again, I'll show you some video of that in a moment. But it depends on the individual scarf, whether you need this one at all. I find pretty much you always need an additional one underneath at the back. But if you need a second one, you'll soon know where you're having your troubles. If you're having your troubles getting the top shed to open cleanly, then you put it through when the top shed is open. And you use this to help separate the fibres so that they don't stick at all. So in this image, you can see this is a side view of the one that I showed you previously. The shuttle is through underneath all of the threads here, and then there's a second shuttle through, and it's actually through the top shed. At the moment, it's sitting in the bottom shed, which is coming through nice and cleanly. When you raise this up onto the top shed, if you need to, you can move this down and rotate it up to its edge to help clear the threads. And as I said before, it depends very much on how you've warped the loom, the particular arrangement of your decorative threads that will determine whether this is helpful at all and whether it's helpful in this case, the up shed as this one is, or in the down shed. So if it was to go through the down shed, it'd go through this area here. Because it's up here, you can see the cross. This is actually in the up shed. This is a similar setup, but here I tried having it in both sheds, and believe me, it doesn't work. It was worth a try. It would be much better for this one on the right to be underneath all of the fibres. But what is interesting about this, and the reason I actually included it, is because these particular threads weren't under the same tension as the rest of the warp threads. So I stuck something behind just to extend them a little bit. Now you can hang weights. I find this is a glue stick or a spool of cotton is quite useful, just to put a little bit of extra tension. So if you find that as you're weaving, you're having some threads regularly that get skipped, it's because they haven't got enough tension. And that's one of the issues of having such a variety of threads. It's hard to get even tension on all the threads. So it may be possible to have a number of spools of cotton, glue sticks, or I've got at least 4 weights that I can hang off the back here to even up the tension in the threads. This is a close-up view of that piece of weaving. Here you can see what the feathers looks like when it's woven down, and it really is quite lovely. And this was in a straight 7.5 dent reed, and here you see I've used 2 strands of yarn because they were a 4-ply, so I've used 2 together to give an 8-ply equivalent. And right across here, from there to there, I've got double strands of yarn. This is a standard 8-ply or double knit, so I've just used it on its own, and the same here. And the feathers yarn also I use at an 8-ply setting, which is the 7.5 dents per inch reed. So to summarise, select your warp yarns carefully. Test them to see if they're strong enough for a warp. If not, they make a great weft. But give them a good couple of snaps to see if they're going to hold up, and try and select yarns that have a similar stretchiness, which is one of the problems with getting a good tension. If you've got yarns which are different degrees of stretch, It's very hard to warp them all consistently. When you initially put the yarns under tension, make sure that you have a really good hold of the yarns as they go through. It's tempting with the rigid heddle to be fairly soft on the tension. After I take it off my warp peg, I hold it quite tightly as I roll it onto the back beam. And that's really, really important. I also use cardboard to help really pad out those yarns and make sure that they can't sink in. You must have something between them. I really don't find the cardboard warp sticks that Ashford supply to be all that wonderful. I've tried timber warp sticks. They're somewhat better, but really I find that the corrugated cardboard that you can just get from any office supply store, because it's used for packaging, is really the best bet for me. And then you can use additional shuttles to get an increase in the tension. This is after you've got everything warped up and you're ready to start weaving. First of all, place a shuttle under all of the warp threads and push it right to the back. Sometimes that's enough, particularly if you have followed the other steps and got really good tension, or you don't have a big variety in the kinds of yarns. If you find you're still getting skipped threads or it's still too sticky, place a shuttle, an additional shuttle, behind the heddle. Now, whether that's in the top shed or the bottom shed depends on just how you've arranged your warp yarns. Try it both ways and see which works best for you. Now, I have websites, tasmanianu2u.com and .com.au, and I've also set up a Facebook page. It's very easy to contact me, probably on the Facebook page is the easiest, but on the websites, both of which point, it's only one website, but there's two names for it. I'll have some more hints and tips there. And please, if you like my tutorials or you want to have more information, there's information on the websites and Facebook, but I am in the process of doing a very detailed DVD for sale that will go through step by step a lot of the points that I've made in this one.